this day in boxing history, Big George Foreman stops Micheal Moorer and reclaims the heavyweight title. Hello, fight fans. Coach Nathan of NS Champ 7 Power Boxing Series at NSChamp7.com back at you again with another look back at an iconic fight producing an iconic champion. George Foreman's win on November 5th, 1994 at the MGM Grand in Paradise, Nevada, well, it was the culmination of having 29 fights over a 7-year period after a 10-year layoff. Now remember, folks, this man was from a generation of heavyweight fighters who were long gone from the boxing scene when this occurred. Guys like Jimmy Young, Ron Lyle, Kenny Norton, Smoking Joe Frazier, and the greatest himself, Muhammad Ali. This feat probably won't be duplicated for a while, if ever. Now, the primary reasons that George himself stated for his motivation to return to boxing was to build youth centers for at-risk youth in his hometown of Houston, Texas. Second was to show that boxing and pretty much life beyond 40 years of age is not a death sentence, and because he needed the finances, or one could say the man was broke. Now, heading into the match, he wore the same red trunks he wore when he was stopped in 8 rounds by Muhammad Ali in that Rumble in the Jungle 20 years earlier in Zaire, Africa. He also had the man who was in the opposite corner against him that night, Ali's trainer, Hall of Famer, Angelo Dundee. Another interesting thing about Big George is that he hadn't had a fight in over a year, and that was a 12-round decision loss to Tommy Duke Morrison. On the other hand, Micheal Moorer had well earned his spot at the top of the heavyweight division, having just beaten Evander the Real Deal Holyfield for the WBA and IBF world titles earlier that year. He was undefeated at 35-0. He's a boxer puncher and a southpaw who had excellent trainers who developed him. First was Hall of Famer Emanuel Stewart from the legendary Kronk Gym in Detroit, Michigan. After that, Hall of Fame trainer Teddy Atlas, who was with him for this fight, and he worked with another great trainer in Freddie Roach later in his career. Now, I stated that he was a southpaw. Now, one thing about southpaws, folks, is that if you stand right in front of them, it's easier to get hit with their straight left because it has less distance to travel to your chin or to your nose. That's why young fighters are taught to move to your left away from their power left. But in this case, Foreman was repeatedly hit with lefts and rights, causing his face to swell throughout the fight. And going into the 10th round, he was behind on all 3 scorecards, with 2 of the judges scoring the fight at 88-83, and another had it 86-85. In the corner, Dundee told him he needed a knockout to win, and he went out and did just that, as Moorer, who just needed to box the last 2 rounds, stood right in front of George, trying to knock him out, causing him to get flattened by a short right hand, of which he couldn't beat the 10 count, thus putting Foreman in the record books. As a matter of fact, he broke 3 records that night. He became the oldest man to win the heavyweight championship of the world, second, the first fighter to win a world title 20 years after losing it, and third, no heavyweight champ or contender for that matter had beaten an opponent who was 19 years younger. George would go on to have 4 more fights, ending with a split decision loss to Shannon Briggs, but not before breaking Briggs' nose in the process. He retired about a month before his 49th birthday with a record of 76 wins, 5 defeats, with 68 by way of knockout. Foreman has been inducted into the World Boxing Hall of Fame and the International Boxing Hall of Fame. He was also a ringside analyst for 12 years on HBO Boxing. A successful entrepreneur and an ordained Baptist minister. Foreman himself sums up his life this way, and I quote, "It doesn't matter what you achieve or what you accomplish in this life. The most important thing is to keep your eye on the prize, and that's serving God. Not a bad message for today's youth, especially from a guy who was a troubled youth himself, but overcame the hardships and obstacles of being born and raised in the rough Fifth Ward community of Houston, Texas. So that's my take on this one, folks. Another look back in the beautiful history of professional prize fighting. But don't forget, for elite boxing instruction, elite boxing analysis, and elite boxing philosophy, click that like and notification button, share and subscribe to NS Champ 7 Part Boxing Series at nschamp7.com.